Robert G. Wilmers was much more than the Buffalo-Niagara region's biggest banker. Wilmers, who died unexpectedly Saturday night, was a unifying force for the region's business community at a time when it was scattered and weakened by self-interest. As chairman and CEO of M&T Bank, Wilmers, 83, was one of the first to see the potential in the Buffalo-Niagara region as a back-office banking power, where the region's lower wage scale and more affordable cost of living would allow banks like M&T to grow and serve their customers, without taking on the lofty expenses of the sexier money centers, like New York City and Chicago. He was a strong believer that a business can only be as strong as the community it's in, which prompted him to turn M&T into one of the biggest boosters of the region's cultural organizations and Buffalo's troubled public schools. And most of all, he was a heck of a banker, building tiny M&T Bank, a small bank in the depressed backwater of Buffalo that had just $2 billion in assets when he took charge in 1983, into one of the nation's 20 biggest banks, with more than 17,000 employees and more than $120 billion in assets, 60 times more than when he arrived in Buffalo. Wilmers wasn't afraid to make a deal, either, using 24 acquisitions in the ensuing 34 years to turn M&T into a national banking power, even joining with Berkshire Hathaway chairman Warren E. Buffett in 1991 to help put together the financial backing M&T needed to buy 14 branches of the failed savings and loan, Goldome and Vault M&T into a top-tier bank in western New York. Bob Wilmers was the clear leader of the business community, said Robert T. Brady, the former Moog Inc. chief executive officer and a longtime M&T board member. From a practical perspective, his major contribution was the development of the bank, Brady said. But he also set an example that the leaders of Western New York business should feel an obligation to support and improve the circumstance of Western New York, economic and otherwise. A New York City native who spent much of his childhood in Belgium, Wilmers quickly embraced the Buffalo-Niagara region after coming to M&T. Wilmers' soft-spoken nature belied a man with a keen intellect and a sweeping grasp of both M&T and the banking industry. It was not uncommon for M&T employees to recall the first time they met Wilmers as an encounter that was more of an interrogation than a conversation. He had a tremendous command for detail. He knew a lot about a lot, said Dottie Gallagher-Cohen, the president of the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership. He was a man very much interested in other people, Brady said. When you were getting acquainted, he wanted to know all about you and your interests, Brady said. At the end of the meeting, he knew all about you. You may or may not have learned much about him. He didn't like to talk about himself. In the early 1990s, he was a driving force behind the formation of the Greater Buffalo Development Foundation, which was the region's first major initiative to study the forces driving the Buffalo-Niagara economy and how to capitalize on them. The group eventually merged with the Buffalo Chamber of Commerce to form the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership, but in many ways, it was the first attempt to move beyond business boosterism to a more studied approach to economic development and business issues, a precursor to the strategic plans that now form the backbone of states' regional economic development councils.